Well, I can't tell you how wonderful it is to be here, really. You know, I'm from the Central Coast. I lived in Santa Barbara for 26 years, and then I did this extraordinary and inexplicable thing of moving to the Mojave Desert. That was 9 years ago, and I appreciate so much being remembered and being invited here by Phil, and, you know, being made to feel so welcome by Friday and Marcia, and just to read for you. I mean, you have the most wonderful poetry community that I'm aware of, really. So thank you for coming and for having me. So I've actually got 7 books of
Wow.
poetry related to the desert by now. It's been a great place for poetry for me. I'll be reading from the most recent one, which is called Waking Life. So I'll be telling a lot of stories about the desert, and I'll begin with a poem that draws from the Serrano culture, the Native American culture that was, you know, the predominant one in our area. They really were so prosperous and thriving. It's estimated that their population at the peak was around 20,000. And by the turn of the last century, that was down to less than 100 people. So it's a real tragedy, but, you know, the tribe has made a small comeback in its own way. There's very little you can even see that's left of this culture. I mean, all the artifacts were taken and squirreled away and scattered and so forth. But on the other hand, if you go out into the landscape, you will very quickly learn, you know, that their presence is still everywhere. So this poem draws from stories in a book called Always Believe, and it's stories told by a Serrano elder named Dorothy Ramon. So incredible oral tradition. I mean, this is almost 900 pages of stories in this book. So creation stories and so forth. So this poem is called From the Beginning. We live where people have lived from the beginning, where giants care for and hold up the earth, where spirits ride in on whirlwinds, where wind is their breath and that's what we breathe, where we recall the planet we came from, where we sing to the dead and guide them home, their eyes open to see a bright future, where songs carry maps of our desert, where everything we see was once human, where humans can turn into anything, where birds say their names in the old language, where we know the power of feathers, where medicinal herbs call out, "Here I am," where stones are alive because they used to be people, where runners arrive with no passage of time, where shamans exhale to send their words skyward, where coyote races rabbit across the Milky Way, where a spider web holds the earth together, where the world spinning keeps our hearts beating. So, and in a similar vein, this next one is about the 2 mountains that define our horizon, Mount San Gorgonio and Mount San Jacinto. These are really big, mighty mountains, and they're snow-covered at the peaks for a lot of the year. And the interesting thing is, as you go around our high desert, all of a sudden, out of the corner of your eye, you'll see one or the other or both of these mountains. It's almost like they're following you around, and you see them when you least expect it. So this is called Gorgonio and Jacinto. Guardians, they scan the horizon from opposing mountain ranges, divided by a gap of 20 miles. Their snow-capped peaks gleam above the pass that separates one upheaval from another. In rarefied air, they make their own weather, trapping clouds and storms, their runoff taking dry washes by surprise. They telegraph messages back and forth, vibrations too deep for human hearing. Gorgonio sings, "When I was a volcano, I blew smoke in Coyote's eyes. He still remembers that stinging." Jacinto answers, "Older brother, what you say is true. Coyote ran here to get away from you." They share their memories, the rush of seeds sprouting in sun-struck ground, boulders strewn every which way, the silence of altitude, nearness of stars. Patient as saints, the brothers wait for the return of Dakush, the low-flying meteor that brought the first people. So Bill and I do live very near Joshua Tree National Park. We spend a lot of time there, and one of our favorite trails is Split Rock Loop. It's a really picturesque trail, hilly, with lots of the, Monzo granite outcroppings that Joshua Tree is so famous for, and, big vistas off into the distance. So this is my poem for Split Rock Loop. The forces that made this maze of rock let me walk through the midst of upheaval, past the Indian shelter at a riven boulder marred by graffiti, down a narrow trail toward the wild. Thick mineral veins roll east to west across the convoluted landscape, a chronicle of chaos I trace with my eyes. 3 times I step over fresh black scat, but coyote hangs back, silent, screened by pines and scrub and piled granite. Late, a pewter sky breaks to blue streaked clouds and contrails, and me, standing among magenta pencil cholla, wrapped in my skin, breath, aspirations, coming to know my place by placing myself here. So this is about a cactus flower, and cactus flowers are so amazing. They almost seem to collect light, and glow from within, So this is called "This Is No Cactus Flower." This is no cactus flower, but a very large array, synchronized motion on a spiny host, beaming radio waves into deep space. Each golden stamen is a celestial receiver, storing messages from the home star for a winged posterity. The deep central well is a wormhole. If you fell in, you'd emerge light years distant, legs dusted with pollen. Nested crimson petals are solar panels. Their energy stuns you. You retreat as best you can, dazed, skull buzzing. When you wake from this spell, the so-called flower will wither, and you will forget its true nature. So I do some vegetable gardening out there in the desert, which is made possible by having what is basically a small fort, just a kind of a box covered on all sides with wire mesh, top, bottom, and everything, so the critters can't get at what's inside. Otherwise, we would never have anything to eat from there at all. So this poem is called Egypt Among Beets. High noon, and I'm rinsing a rainbow of beets, orange, red, striped, easing clumps of dirt off the tendrilled roots, when a lump of something else hits the sink, a sizable beetle, iridescent green and gold, no ordinary darkling, but a scarab. He's waterlogged, glowing like a stand-in of the sun god, eschewing Mojave sand for sweet, damp loam and the food I grow. Once I pulled wild beets by the Nile and unearthed his ancestor, wore the sacred amulet, prayed for good things in this life and the next, sang and danced the ritual of the beetle, and so arrived at this moment. I placed Kefir outside to find his land legs, the left front still clutching a bit of red root. If you've ever spent any time in the desert, you might have experienced a phenomenon. It kind of goes like this. You're out somewhere on a hike, and you see something off in the distance, some interesting feature of the landscape, and you think, oh, that looks really interesting. I'm going to go over there. And you start heading in that direction. You think it's not far at all, and suddenly you realize that it's much farther away than you thought, and you may actually never get there at all. So this poem is about that phenomenon. It's called Desert Survival on Distance. It's the reverse of a rear-view mirror. Objects are farther than they appear. When the air is clear, you can touch that rim rock on the horizon, yet start walking and you're no closer, as though you're treading water. Soon you enter the dream time, lost in a creosote forest where every bush looks the same as the next. Turn back, and the way you came has vanished. Animal tracks crisscross at random, no jackrabbit or coyote in sight. Even the birds leave you to your fate, a heavy, deafening silence. Tell the sun you're innocent. All you wanted was a small adventure. You thought you brought plenty of water, but that was a lifetime ago. A vast expanse of sand extends from your feet to the sky. You could go anywhere from here if you ever get out. So in this book, Waking Life, there's a couple of sections where the poems are accompanied by photographs taken by my husband, Bill Dahl. Actually, in these collaborations, the photographs always come first, and Bill has a wonderful eye for going out in the desert and finding really unique and interesting views. So I'm going to read one of those poems. It's from an area in Joshua Tree National Park called Barker Dam Trail. And it's an iconic destination, and we tried to give it kind of a mythic feel. So in the photograph, there's a massive sheer rock wall. And set inside this rock wall is a very distinct human figure with a head and a body, just kind of set in there. So he seemed to have a story that wanted to be told, so this is my version of his story. It's called Outlier. He was from a far-off land, or so we guessed, wrapped in skins like a Northman. We could not place his visage or amulets of carved bone. He strode forth at sunset through violet clouds, fearsome yet unsettled, a banished shaman lost without his tribe. He stood some distance from our fire, silent, as night fell around us. At first light, we saw him as you see him now, in the rocks where no spell can touch him, where he can touch no one. So there's a follow-up poem to that. One day we were back out on the trail with some friends looking up at that rock formation and the figure there. And as we were standing there, a bighorn sheep appeared on the rock ledge directly over the head of this figure. And this sheep took an interest in our group and proceeded to come down from that height down to our level and follow us up the trail. So this is what happened next. So this is called Soothsayer. In the desert, anything is possible. A shaman sequesters in sheer rock, obvious but forgotten. Eons later, strangers spot him. Spiral horns carving sky, granite stare in liquid eye, down, down the bighorn. Hooves clatter, leap boulder to boulder, bend laws of gravity, play the edges. Half rock follows the trail in parallel, fades into the landscape. Then, near water, startles the humans head on. Hold steady, travel light, trust your breath and your body. Nothing here can stop you. Let go and land on your feet. So the last section of this book has bird poems. I've been writing a lot of bird poems for the last couple years. So these will be a few of those. And this first one is about a woman who lives alone in a remote corner of our desert, and it's called Bird Woman of Wonder Valley. Her morning ritual begins with breath, the steady rise and fall of her chest, then a flutter of eyes as the eastern sky reddens. Naked, she descends from her rooftop bed to the wild ground of her oasis. A stand of palm, tamarisk, and mesquite she anoints with water too brackish for drinking. She opens a bin and scoops seeds, scatters them wide for sparrows who nest in her trees, who sing all day unless a hawk scares them to silence. Years ago, she stopped trying to be the right bird, took refuge among the creosote. Liked being alone so much, she removed the passenger seat from her truck. Her favorite time of day is dusk, when quail shoot up to the treetops, disturbing doves already settled behind dry, rustling fronds. In starlight, she dreams of gold talons, hears wing beats that mimic her heart. Well, this next one was in Askew a while back. It's about a roadrunner called Tail Feather. My eyes fly open, oddly alert after a night of little sleep. So I dress for an early walk and watch a roadrunner out back who takes stock of me, cocking his head, twisting his tail, black feathers tipped with white. That image stays with me, down the dirt road, across vacant lots, on coyote trails lined with juniper and cholla, to the junction of the next dirt road, where a black feather, white-tipped, waits. Out of habit, I go on, then turn and pick up the gift, seemingly meant for me, because I've tried too hard all my life, worried too much, felt lost more often than found. I need exactly what this feather is, a rudder to steer while running through sun-washed days of reckoning. So long ago in our desert, there used to live a really gigantic bird. It's known as the incredible wind god bird. And this was in prehistoric times. They've only found a few fragments of it, but they've been able to reconstruct what it must have looked like and estimate its size. And basically, it was like a T-Rex with wings. Whoa. So a really big bird. This, 100 million years ago or more. So I wrote this poem from the perspective of the bird, and it's called I Remember. Eons ago, I commanded the sky, no natural enemies to stop me. Four-leggeds ran when they heard my thunder. I slept with my eyes open, stalking the slightest crack of twig, rustle of grass. My claws gripped the cliff, my gaze burned earth like lava. I would erupt, swoop and tear, wings beating death in my wake. I owned that bald crag you now see rounded and green. It was agony to leave my skin of feathers and let my bones be scattered. I've been reborn more times than I can count, seeking a form where I might feel again the rush of air, the soaring, the hunger, and its end. So this is my last poem, and it's actually the title poem of my previous book, kind of summing up the desert life for me, and it's called Desert Dweller. Don't listen to what anyone says. If you want to be baptized in the place of no water, humans are not the center. Arrive on a lenticular cloud, chart the maze of sand and rock. Let heat flay your flimsy skin, expose your core to light. No grief is too great for this wilderness to devour, no anger too vast. If you muster the courage to stay, find your own way to be an eremite. The desert has died and come back 10,000 times and will not let you forget. Every last creature inhabits you, part of you. Follow the trail to the end and keep going. Your ears will fill with music. Dig in when the earth starts to shake, when flood, fire, and gale remake your chosen ground. If your heart's not in it, you won't be here long.